Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 64 of the Meet the Parents podcast and another weekly slice of chat about parenting life. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm joined by Mark from Best Dad I Can Be. Good evening, Mark.
Tim, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So this week we're going to talk about a restaurant with an unusual policy for parents and getting our kids into the great outdoors. Now, I came across an interesting story about a New York restaurant with an unusual policy last week. Peddler's Bar and Grill restricts how much alcohol it will serve parents who are eating there with their children. Their policy states, "The commitment to end fatalities from drinking and driving requires all of us to participate. Each of us takes part in this mission in our own unique way. We at Peddlers will limit one of the responsible adults to one alcoholic beverage while dining with children." Aside from the obvious joke about it being impossible to survive dinner out with your kids on only one drink, do we think it's right for a restaurant to enforce a policy like this? Mark, what do you think?
I think this is quite an interesting question, really, Tim. I think there's two issues here. One is, should you drink and drive at all when you have your children with you? And the other one is, should you actually drink when you are in charge of your children? I sort of plead guilty to the first one and slightly guilty to the second one as well. So if social services are listening, I'll come quietly. The first one I think is interesting, that I'm one of those people who, if we went out for a meal with the children, I would have a drink and then I would drive home. And I never really thought too much about that until my own children started to drive, when I really thought, should I actually have not drunk at all before I drove the children home?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, like you, if I'm out for the evening and driving, my general policy as well is to allow, one alcoholic drink up front and then switch to soft drinks thereafter. And I'm sure there are a lot of other parents like both you and I who do something similar. But it's an interesting question, whether are we setting a good example by having one drink, or should we be having none at all?
As I say, I didn't really start to think about it until my own children started to drive. When I started to think to myself, I think I probably got that wrong, and actually I should have had no drinks at all. Neither of us have ever been afraid to say to the children that we have a glass of wine with a meal. And as the children have got older, having a drink with them has been one of life's real pleasures. I've really enjoyed that. All parents look back and they say, I got that right, I got that wrong. I think that's one that I would do differently if I had my time over again.
Now you mention it, I think we very rarely drink when we're out with the kids. For whatever reason, maybe it's because we're typically out with them at lunchtime more than dinner time, but even when we're out with them in the evening, we very rarely drink in front of them. So maybe there is something subconsciously that's stopping us from doing that.
By extension, how often do you drink in front of your children? I tend to have a glass of wine, usually, most nights of the week. I don't hide that from the kids at all. I just wonder, am I setting the best example? I don't know. I probably aren't. But I've always taken the view with drinking, it's far better to be open and honest and discuss it with your kids.
We don't often drink in front of the kids. When we do, it's often because we have friends over, or it's a Christmas dinner or a birthday thing or something like that, and there's something, there's an occasion to celebrate. But at the same time, we used to visit friends in France where they have a much more relaxed attitude to having a glass of wine with dinner and to feeding kids a glass of wine that's been watered down, just to get them used to it. And I do find that way of life quite actually quite positive and quite pleasant, because you're not creating a stigma around drinking. You have to do what feels right to you as a parent, doesn't it? But I think setting a good example is something we should always be mindful of.
Always. We went down the watered down wine route, but the children just didn't like it as a drink, so they reverted to drinking water with meals or whatever else they were drinking. But I think I probably come back to my answer to most parenting questions, which is to be open with your children, to discuss it, and don't ever be afraid of talking about it, and say, and don't be afraid of admitting that you as a parent can get things wrong.
I guess going back to this particular example, I think I've ended up thinking that it's maybe just a little bit pompous and pretentious for a restaurant to preach about, a commitment to end fatalities from drink driving. I absolutely applaud the intention of trying to make parents think a little bit before drinking too much, especially if they're out with their kids. But to me, it just still feels a little bit like a distant relative criticising a teenager because their girlfriend has had her tongue pierced, or something like that. And I think there's an element of what's it got to do with them?
I'd agree with that, but it's not something I would do if I owned a restaurant. But would you stop serving drinks to somebody who you thought was driving their children home? I mean, yes, you would, wouldn't you?
Having said that, the story's raised a few other questions in my mind. So, there's almost, I guess, an unwritten assumption here that all families will have travelled by car. But what if they've arrived by cab or by public transport, or if they live within walking distance? Which I realise for many Americans, when we talk about walking distance, we're talking about 100 feet. But even so, should the policy apply to them as well? Are you penalising people who are maybe walking because they live just around the corner from having a drink? It's the public demands to know how this policy works.
I suppose the answer is that when you take the order, that you've got to ask how they arrived and do they intend to take a cab home and all sorts of things, haven't you? It becomes slightly impractical.
Let's conclude this discussion by talking about some rules and policies that we would like to see. So I think in the greater scheme of things, a one drink only rule is, it's relatively harmless. It's certainly less inflammatory and discriminatory than, say, asking a Muslim woman to remove her hijab in a public place. But are there any rules or policies that you think should be enforced that would make the world a better place? Now, I know, Mark, Sundays are a particularly sacrosanct time for you, aren't they?
You just mentioned, Tim, that you went to France and you thought there's certain things here that we can learn. And we went to France, and it would be maybe 10 years ago now. We stayed with some friends, and they said to us that in the village, and I don't know whether it applied just in that village, whether it was a local thing, or whether it applied nationally in France, but in that village, you could not make a loud noise in your garden between sort of 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the evening on a Sunday. You couldn't mow your lawn, you couldn't do DIY, you couldn't do anything like that because it disturbed the peace of the day. And I thought that was just a fantastically sensible rule that improved the quality of life. I mean, how you would enforce it, I haven't got a clue. But I would certainly think it's a really good rule that we could bring in that would bring back a bit of peace and quiet and family time, and sit there with your glass of wine or your glass of water and talk to your children.
Yeah, because I think there's a similar law that exists in Switzerland which restricts what you can and can't do on a Sunday. So these are rules and laws that do work in various places, just not in the UK. Now, I had a bit of a think myself about some rules or policies that I'd like enforced, and I've got quite a long list, but let me just pick out 3 or 4 highlights. So I think I've mentioned this first one at least once before, way back when, but I wish more would be done about people who park in disabled or parent and child spaces when they don't have either a blue badge or a child. And I've always wanted the punishment for this to fit the crime. So if you can't be bothered to park another 20 metres away because you're too lazy to walk that far, I would gladly tow the offending vehicle to the furthest corner of the car park and then deflate all 4 tyres.
Yeah, and that mother and child does not mean mother and 15-year-old child. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm absolutely with you on that one.
What else? I'd also like someone to hold the tabloid press to account for making stuff up and then make them do more than just publish a one-sentence apology that's buried on page 28 4 weeks after the fact. Oh, definitely, I would have a blanket ban on using the word celebrity in the same breath as the name of any person who is only famous for appearing on reality TV shows, especially if that person has no notable qualities other than the fact that they are loud, opinionated and look good on TV. And finally, and in all seriousness, I really do actually want this to happen, I'd like social networks to do more to clamp down on trolls, bullies and threatening behaviour. Now, they say they're trying, but I know of one case of a blogger who has had someone passing themselves off as her on several occasions, posing as the police to threaten her with legal action, making various libelous claims and even posing death threats. And yet they're repeatedly popping up with new accounts all over the place and starting the whole cycle of unpleasantness over and over again, and that just can't be right.
That's just a worrying part of life, isn't it? Not just the individual case, but the whole social media has got a lot to answer for in that, whether it's the I thought the last general election was particularly unpleasant for social media. We've covered this, haven't we, before, on both sides. Social media gives people a voice, and very often that voice is a fairly unpleasant one, and it's depressing, but I think that situation will only get worse.
Yeah, sadly that does seem to be the case, doesn't it? So there you have it. If you're mowing your lawn at an unsociable hour on Sunday morning, or if we catch you parking in a disabled spot without a blue badge, be warned, Mark and I are coming to get you. Another episode, another survey. A poll by car care brand Armour All, other brands of car care are available, found that 42% of parents haven't spent time playing with their children outside in the past 2 weeks. 20% hadn't done so in over 2 months, and 8% had gone over 6 months since doing so. Now, given the unusually high amount of sunshine we've had over the past couple of months, we can't even use the Great British Weather as an excuse this year. So, Mark, what do you think of these numbers? Surprising or not?
Disappointing, I mean, obviously my children are much older now, but thinking back to when they were younger, we as soon as we could go out in the garden and play, we were always out there. I mean, we're very fortunate here in that we live probably 5 minutes walk from the beach, so we would always try and be outside when the weather allowed it. Particularly the two boys, I was always trying to force them outside to play cricket or football, or hurl a frisbee at them, or do any number of things. As it turned out, Eleanor was the sporty one. But yeah, we were always outside to the best of my memory.
1 in 5 parents going 2 months or more without playing with their kids outdoors. Disappointing. It's depressingly high, isn't it? I mean, I'm guessing a large proportion of those are more likely to be living in, somewhere like inner city areas where maybe the local environment may not be overly conducive to playing outdoors. But equally, I wonder how many of that 20% never play with their kids at all, whether it's outdoors or indoors.
I remember taking the dog to the vets and reading a stat that 25% of dogs had never been taken out for a walk, and I thought, how is that possible? The figures are surprising, but I just loved playing with the children. I really did. I mean, I frequently injured myself playing with the children, especially around this time of year when football season was looming, and I was demonstrating my array of football talent of flicking the ball up behind me and volleying it into the apple tree and stuff. But I used to love being outside with them.
Yeah, it does make me thankful that we live somewhere where the kids can play safely outside our house, and there are lots of outdoor spaces close by for us to use. Now, of course, that's no accident. We deliberately wanted to move somewhere like that when we moved house in the first place, but it's something not to take for granted, I guess. Now, we'll come on to a specific recent example of you spending time in the great outdoors in a minute, but have you ever been in the situation where you've had to encourage any of your kids to get outside, or have they always been, relatively willing?
With the two boys, you do find as boys get older that they are much more prone to staying inside on the computer. I mean, Dan, particularly as he was going through his teenage years, he was working on his computer. He was upstairs in his bedroom studying, doing things. So you would occasionally think to yourself, I just wish they'd go outside in the fresh air. I think you can't force them when they get to a certain age. They sort of come back to it in their own time. And as I speak, Alex has just walked a couple of miles down to the seafront to meet his girlfriend, and will be walking back. So he'll be getting plenty of healthy, fresh air, I hope.
Now, for us, Isaac and Cara rarely need any encouragement to get outside, although Toby, who, he's a bit of a homeboy and he's a lover of pyjama days, he sometimes needs coaxing to get out of the house. It definitely helps that we live at the end of a cul-de-sac and we have other kids of a similar age in the street, so, the kids are often outside playing football, or they're on their bikes and scooters, or they're mapping out complex road systems with chalk. And it's not just roads. Being the modern and car-obsessed kids that they are, some of their efforts have included park and ride facilities and electric car charging points. It'll be toll roads next. So, with your kids, did you ever find that did you ever give them outdoor chores to do, such as, washing the car or helping with the gardening or anything like that?
We did try and get them involved a little bit. They didn't have specific chores to do. I remember Alex doing a spectacular job of clearing the garage out a couple of Easters ago, and me subsequently making several trips to the tip. But no, they didn't have specific chores as in, you will cut the grass, this, that and the other. But we did just encourage them to be out as much as possible.
Thinking back to when I was a kid, I mowed the lawn under the watchful eye of my father from the age of maybe 10 or 11. So that's one chore that I'm quite looking forward to handing off to Isaac sooner rather than later, as I don't really have any real love for gardening. We have on occasion got the kids to wash their mum's car, although wash is perhaps stretching the Trade Descriptions Act a bit further than it ever should. And it's for that very reason that I refuse to let them do my car, because they only make it dirtier. Have you got any particular memories of being outdoors with your parents as a child?
Yeah, I remember family holidays. My father worked away a lot, but he was very good. He would always sort of come outside and play cricket with me when I was younger. I was an absolute cricket obsessive when I was younger. The age that I guess Isaac is now. I mean, my life seemed pretty straightforward in that I would play football all winter and then play cricket for England all through the summer, which just seemed a perfectly reasonable expectation at that stage. From the age of 10 or 11, my outdoors revolved pretty much in the summer around endlessly playing cricket. I played for the school and I played for a couple of other teams as well. I remember forcing my dad outside, all the time to bowl at me and this, that and the other. That was it for me. I pretty much just took myself off outside, because I just wanted to be outside playing cricket all the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I have particularly vivid memories of when I first started playing cricket with my dad as well. Now, I must have been about 6, and I remember him buying me my first bat from Woolworths. Remember them? And teaching me about treating the blade with linseed oil and all that, which you don't have to do these days. And
it's all wrong, Tim. You've got to, this should be obligatory in schools, that you've got to rub your bat with linseed oil and you've got to put dubbing on your football boots. This is where the country's gone wrong,
Absolutely.
My bat is actually here I've still got it in the corner of the bedroom. Just that I'm emotionally attached to that cricket bat.
I guess I had similar feelings. So, my dad taught me how to, to rub the bat with linseed oil, and, we would then go out to a local park on weekends, and he would patiently bowl dolly balls at me for me to club away to an imaginary boundary for hours on end. And sadly, I don't think I wasn't as good as you were. I never really progressed beyond being vaguely competent. My batting was, to put it mildly, distinctly agricultural, and although I could bowl a decent leg break, that was at a time when all anyone ever seemed to want was to be a fast bowler in the style of the West Indies quicks. Have you got any fond memories of being outdoors with your kids?
All of them, just all of them, all the time. I mean, even taking Eleanor to cross-country races and freezing to death. They weren't fond memories at the time, but they are now. We used to take the kids to Centre Parks on holiday. Used to love that. Absolutely love that. I loved the freedom they had to go off on their bikes. I remember one family holiday when we rented a cottage in Norfolk. That was just great. We were just out on the beach walking all the time. There was another cottage we used to rent up in Northumberland. Must have been there 3 or 4 times. Poignantly, it was one year we took my mum with us, which was really nice because it was the last holiday she ever went on. That cottage was fantastic because it had a stream at the bottom of it, and the kids would just wander off and go and dam up the stream and cut off the water supply to the village, and it was just delightful to have them outside and not doing anything electronic, and it was just lovely.
We had a nice little moment this last week when we took Cara out on her bike without stabilisers for the first time, and she basically cracked it straight away. So all that gymnastics training has obviously been beneficial for her balance. And continuing on with my cricketing experiences from my youth, I'm delighted that our until now sports shy Isaac has started playing cricket for a local village junior team this year. Now he's not brilliant, but he's improving with every passing week, and it's really done wonders for his confidence. In fact, I'm going with him to Lords this week to watch a 2020 game. I mean, okay, I'm still a bit of a test match purist at heart, but if going to a live match helps cement his enthusiasm for the game, that's fine by me. So having talked about experiences with the great outdoors as both kids and fathers, that segues neatly into our final topic for the night. So last year, Mark and his son walked the Pennine Way together, 90 miles in 5 days, providing a special father-son bonding experience and providing the material for his book, Father, Son and the Pennine Way. Now, this year they decided to go for a comparative stroll in the park. So, Mark, why don't you start by giving us the background to this year's adventure? What was it, and why did you decide to do it?
When we were on the Pennine Way last year, we sort of said that we would like to do one every year as an ongoing father-son thing to do. This year's been difficult because Alex has had his A-levels and he's got his first serious girlfriend, and taking 5 days away from Libby would just be impossible. But we did try to do, the intention was to do the Lyke-Wake Walk, which is 40 miles across the highest, widest part of the North Yorkshire Moors. You start at Osmotherley, which is near Northallerton, and you finish at Ravenscar, which is just north of Scarborough. And you've got 24 hours to do it in. So that was our intention. We set off last Saturday morning at 5:30 in the morning, and the idea was that we would finish at 9:30 at night, where my lovely wife would be waiting to collect us. And that was the plan. But plans sometimes go astray, as we found out last Saturday.
Yeah, I guess at this point I'm going to resist the temptation to break into a chorus of the Proclaimers' 500 miles, mostly because I'm not going to be the man who wakes up next to you. But so as you've alluded to, how was the weather?
There were two things. That the hills in the first 10 miles were just endless, repetitive and steep. In the Lightweight Walk, you not only walk 40 miles, but you also do the equivalent of climbing up Ben Nevis. So the first 10 miles are seriously tough. But then we reached a long, flat, disused railway track, and all appeared to be well with the world until, and it's astonishing, you're so high up. We were able to look down into one of the valleys where the sun was shining just beautifully. But where we were, the clouds just came in. We were walking in low cloud, and then the heavens just opened. The weather forecast had said possible heavy showers, but we just walked into an apocalyptic thunderstorm and had to walk through it for 4 or 5 miles. And by the time we got to 20 miles, where my wife was waiting with some lunch, I was just defeated by the hills and the rain, and we just had to call it off, which was, from a father's point of view, was really tough to do. I feel quite guilty about it, because I think despite the weather, I think Alex could probably have done it, even though we were about to go onto the most difficult boggy section. But I feel a bit that I've let him down slightly, despite experienced walkers saying, look, to get 20 miles in those conditions was a real effort, and you should be pretty pleased with that. Having said to him, we must do something this year, and him to agree with it, and we started but didn't finish. You know what it's like, Tim, as a parent. You don't ever want to let your children down, and I sort of feel that I did that a little bit. So I need to make it up to him next year.
Yeah. So what would be the plan for next year then?
Well, the plan is that we will try and do that again. But I mean, I've done 6 days serious walking with my son, which have been 6 of the best days of my life, without question. And I would recommend it to any parent. But the British weather has just, on 2 of those 6 days, has just been appalling. And that's on July and the first week of August last year. So I met somebody last year when we were on the Pennine Way who'd walked from Bologna to Florence. Tim, that just sounds really attractive to me. Just, a few trattorias along the way, and a bit of,
maybe a glass or 2 of Chianti en route.
Yeah. Yeah. But just walking with him has been an absolute pleasure. And we've always had a great relationship, being able to talk about things. I mean, I've got to tell you this, he's 18, and he came to me the other day and asked for some advice on his relationship with his girlfriend. I was pretty touched by that.
And I guess, doing these 2 walks over these last 2 years, it's given you, the 2 of you, some real shared anecdotes and allowed you to have some of these in-depth conversations that maybe you wouldn't be able to have as easily if you were just sat around at home. So
yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. A place where it's very easy to have a conversation with your children is when you're driving in the car and you're driving and they're in the passenger seat, and because you're not looking directly at them, you can actually have quite an in-depth conversation. And a walk is the same sort of thing, because there's some distractions going on as well. But we just covered everything, just every subject under the sun, and it's been tremendous, And we've talked not as father and son, but as equals, and it's been really, really good. When he goes away to university in September, I shall miss him like mad, not just because he's the youngest and will be dealing with empty nest syndrome and all that sort of thing, but just because he's a real good friend, and I shall miss him immensely.
So before we go, other than your little weekend ramble, what have you been up to recently?
Actually, Tim, we've been doing something else which is quite bittersweet, which is that we've been clearing out all the old toys and things like that to do a car boot sale next weekend, because we've got to that stage where we've had Playmobil and Lego and all sorts of things stored upstairs for years and years and years, and you get to a stage where you actually think, I think some of this needs to go. So to actually go through all those, and of course, as you're going through them and sorting them out, that they bring back memories all the time. So that's been a bittersweet thing to do. But next Sunday morning, we'll find us ridiculously early at a car boot sale, selling a lot of family memories at 50 pence a bag.
Oh, good luck with that. Last week was the first week of the school holidays for all three of our kids. We packed the boys off to their grandparents in London for a few days, which gave us the opportunity to spend a little bit more, time just with Cara, which was lovely.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to do. Yeah.
And then yesterday we had a barbecue in between the rain showers. I know how to live dangerously. And weather permitting, of course, we've got the aforementioned pilgrimage to Lourdes on Thursday. And that's it for this episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the two of us online. Mark?
Yeah, I'm at Best Dad I Can Be and at bestdadicanbe.com. And if you want to have a read of the opening chapters of the book, that's at markrichards.co.uk.
And I'm at Thatcham Dad, and you can find me at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. You can download this podcast on iTunes and Android devices, from our website at meettheparentspodcast.com and via a variety of podcasting apps. You can also follow us on Twitter at Parents Podcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thank you for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.